Cowboy saved a young native girl from whipping. Next day, she came to his cabin for pay him back. Caleb Morgan had been riding for most of the morning, letting his horse move at a slow, steady pace along the narrow dirt road leading toward the small frontier town. The land around him stretched wide and open, covered with tall grasses that waved whenever the breeze passed through. The air smelled of dust, pine trees, and the faint sweetness of wildflowers growing somewhere beyond sight. Caleb liked mornings like this. They were calm, quiet, and gave him time to think. He had been traveling for weeks, stopping only when he needed rest, food, or a place to water his horse. The frontier could be a lonely place, but Caleb didn't mind that. He had grown used to long stretches without much company. Life on the trail had taught him to enjoy silence, to listen to the wind, and to watch the clouds drift across the sky. He wasn't running from anything. He just preferred moving around rather than living in one place. He liked helping people when he could and keeping trouble far from himself. Some folks called him a cowboy, some called him a wanderer, and some simply called him Morgan. To him, the name didn't matter. What mattered was living a life he wasn't ashamed of. As he approached the town, he noticed how small it looked from a distance. A few wooden buildings stood in a loose row, their roofs touched by the morning sun. Smoke rose from one or two chimneys, telling him people were already awake, cooking breakfast or warming their homes. Caleb guided his horse toward the general store, hoping to buy supplies. He needed flour, maybe a bit of dried meat, and a handful of nails to fix a loose board on his cabin door. He wasn't sure how long he would stay in the area, but he liked to keep his small home in good shape for whenever he returned from traveling. The town was quiet as he entered, just a couple of men sweeping dust from in front of the saloon and an older woman carrying a basket of laundry. A small group of children played near the well, laughing as they splashed each other with water. Caleb gave them a small smile as he rode past, and a few of them waved back shyly. This was the kind of town he didn't mind passing through, a place where people didn't look for trouble, where life was slow and simple. But the calm didn't last. Just as Caleb reached the area behind the trading post, he heard raised voices, sharp, irritated, and filled with frustration. He slowed his horse and listened. At first, he thought it was just another argument about prices or supplies. Frontier towns often had small disagreements, especially when goods were rare or expensive. But as he got closer, he heard a tone that made him uneasy. It wasn't just anger, it was accusation. "You can't be here," a man's voice shouted. "You don't take things you didn't pay for." Caleb's horse shifted slightly, sensing his tension. He guided the animal around the corner of the trading post, and that was when he saw the scene clearly. A young native girl stood near the back steps of the building. She looked no older than 14 or 15. Her long dark hair was braided neatly, and she wore a simple dress decorated with small beadwork that caught the sunlight. Her posture was calm, but her eyes revealed uncertainty. She didn't look frightened, just confused and unsure about how to respond. In front of her stood the storekeeper, a man Caleb recognized from past visits. The storekeeper wasn't a bad man, but he tended to assume the worst when he didn't understand something. He wasn't shouting now, but his voice was firm, and he pointed toward her open hand where a small wooden carving lay. It was shaped like a tiny bird, beautifully carved, smooth, and polished. Caleb immediately understood the misunderstanding. The girl had not stolen anything. She was offering the carving as trade, part of her people's traditional way of exchanging items without coin. But the storekeeper clearly did not know that. He seemed to think she had taken something from his shop without paying. The girl tried to speak, her English soft but clear. "I give this for the tea," she explained slowly. "Trade, my people trade." But the man shook his head. "That's not how we do things here," he said, sounding impatient. "You can't just take whatever you want." Caleb felt a small pull in his chest. He knew he could keep riding, pretend he hadn't seen anything, and stay out of trouble. That was the easier choice. But easy choices weren't always the right ones. He had lived long enough to know that stepping in at the right moment could change someone's day or someone's life. So he dismounted, tying his horse to the post, and walked calmly toward them. "Morning," Caleb said gently, keeping his voice friendly. The storekeeper looked over, surprised but relieved to have another witness. "Morgan," he said, "I'm glad you're here. This girl tried to walk off with something without paying the proper way. I don't know what she thinks she's doing." The girl looked down again at her wooden carving, her expression still patient but wounded by the misunderstanding. Caleb picked up the carving carefully, holding it in his hands. It was fine work, smooth edges, tiny details carved with care. He smiled softly. "This is trade craft," he said. "It's worth more than a bag of tea, maybe two." She wasn't taking anything. She was offering payment in her own way. The storekeeper hesitated, unsure. "Trade craft?" he repeated. Caleb nodded. "Many native tribes trade items they make by hand." "This is not a theft. This is a gift of value. You should take it with respect." The storekeeper scratched the back of his head, realizing his mistake. "Well," he said awkwardly, "I didn't know, thought she was just trying to walk off with it." Caleb gently returned the carving to the girl. "Your trade is good," he said to her softly. "He understands now." She looked up at him, her dark eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above the breeze. The storekeeper sighed. All right," he muttered. "T.S. inside. You can have it for that carving." The girl nodded and walked quietly into the store to complete the trade. Caleb stayed outside, leaning against the wooden post, waiting until she returned. When she stepped out again with a small bundle of tea leaves wrapped in cloth, she paused, looking at him with a quiet intensity, as if studying him, as if trying to understand why a stranger would help her when he had nothing to gain. Caleb offered a small smile. "Safe travels," he said kindly. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she gave a respectful nod, the kind that held meaning beyond words. Then she stepped away from the building, her feet moving lightly across the ground as she headed toward the trees just beyond town. But before she disappeared into the shadows of the forest, she turned once more, glancing back at Caleb. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and he sensed there was more behind her gaze than simple gratitude. It was as though she was making a silent promise when he didn't yet understand. Then she was gone. Caleb breathed in slowly, the morning air cool in his lungs. The town had returned to its usual quiet, but something inside him felt different. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. But the look she gave him stayed in his mind long after she vanished into the trees. He mounted his horse again and continued toward his cabin, unaware that what he had done, something small, something simple, had already tied their lives together in a way he could not yet imagine. And he certainly didn't know that the next morning, at sunrise, someone would knock at his cabin door. Someone carrying gratitude, purpose, and a promise she fully intended to keep. Caleb Morgan rode away from the small frontier town with the same slow, steady rhythm his horse always kept. The sun had climbed higher now, spreading warm light over the open countryside. The wind brushed across the tall grass, bending it like waves on water. Usually, Caleb enjoyed this part of the day the most. It was peaceful, clear, and full of quiet beauty, but his mind wasn't calm the way it usually was. Something kept pulling his thoughts back to the young native girl he had helped that morning. He didn't know why the memory stuck with him so strongly. He had helped people before, folks with wagon wheels stuck in the mud, travelers who lost their way, mothers searching for missing children. The frontier was full of small troubles, and Caleb tried to do what he could when he happened to be near. But this girl, there was something different about her, something in the way she stood calmly even when she was misunderstood, something in her eyes when she looked at him, as if she was seeing more than what he showed the world. Her quiet strength stayed with him as he rode down the narrow path toward his cabin. Caleb lived a little outside the main settlement, near a cluster of tall pine trees. He liked being close enough to town to buy supplies, but far enough to enjoy the stillness of nature. His cabin wasn't large or fancy. It had one room, a small porch, and a simple wooden door that creaked when the wind pushed against it. Smoke rose softly from the stone chimney, a sign that the last fire he built had not fully died during the night. When he reached the cabin, he dismounted and led his horse to the shade, giving it water and removing the saddle. The animal huffed gratefully, lowering its muzzle into the pale wooden bucket. Caleb brushed the dust off its coat and whispered kind words out of habit. His horse was his companion, silent but steady, and he cared for it the way a man cared for an old friend. After tending to the horse, Caleb stepped up onto the porch and pushed open the cabin door. The familiar scent of pine, dried herbs, and aged wood greeted him. He placed his new supplies on the table, a bag of flour, a small tin of salt, and a few nails he'd bought for repairs. The simple tasks of sliding things into their places helped settle his thoughts, yet the image of the young girl lingered. He sat on the edge of his bed and removed his boots, stretching his sore feet. Traveling always left him tired, but today the tiredness felt different. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes, letting the events of the morning play again like a quiet memory unfolding behind his eyelids. He saw the moment he turned the corner behind the trading post. "She's probably with her people now," he murmured to himself, "safe and sound." But the thought brought him no real comfort. The frontier could be unpredictable, weather changed quickly, nights grew cold without warning. And although he had no reason to believe she was in danger, something inside him still worried. "She's just a girl," he whispered again, as if the words would soothe something in his chest. He stood and walked to the small window overlooking the forest. The tall pines swayed gently, their branches whispering secrets to the wind. Beyond them, somewhere between the trees, lived the tribe she belonged to. He didn't know which tribe exactly, there were many in the region, but he knew enough to respect their traditions and land. His father had taught him long ago that understanding someone else's way didn't make you weaker, it made you wiser. Caleb's gaze followed a bird gliding between the branches. It reminded him of the wooden carving the girl had offered that morning. He could still feel the smooth, polished surface in his palm. Someone had carved it with care, with patience, with skill. It was a piece of her world, a piece she had been willing to give away just to trade for simple tea. He wondered who had taught her to carve. A parent. A grandparent? Perhaps she had made it herself. His father used to tell him that every handmade gift held a part of the maker's spirit. If that was true, then that little wooden bird carried a piece of her story. Caleb pushed away from the window. He didn't like getting lost in thoughts he couldn't control. The trail had taught him to stay present, focus on what he could do, not what he couldn't change. But the girl's face refused to fade from his mind. He prepared a simple meal, some bread warmed by the fire and a cup of coffee brewed slowly over the embers. As he ate, he tried again to settle his thoughts. He told himself she was safe, told himself she was strong, told himself she didn't need anything from him. But worry often worked like a tiny seed. It took root before a man even realized he had placed it in the soil. After eating, he worked on repairing the loose board on the cabin door. He hammered nails gently, carefully aligning the wood. Every few minutes he caught himself glancing toward the forest, almost expecting to see her return. He shook his head each time. "She wouldn't come here," he said under his breath. "She has her own people, her own life." The sun dropped lower, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. The air grew cooler, brushing against his skin like a reminder that evening was approaching. Caleb lit a lantern and hung it near the window, letting the warm glow brighten the room. He liked evenings in the cabin, quiet, safe, familiar. Yet tonight he felt an unusual restlessness. He sat on the porch as the first stars began to appear. The forest hummed with life, crickets singing, leaves rustling, the soft call of an owl somewhere in the distance. Caleb breathed in the night air and tried to let the sounds calm him. But instead of peace, he felt the same tug inside him, gentle but unshakable. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she had gone. He didn't know if she had family near. But he knew she had walked into the forest alone. And that knowledge tugged at him again. He couldn't explain why he cared so deeply after only a brief meeting. Maybe it was the way she had stood so quietly while being misunderstood. Maybe it was the respect she showed when she thanked him. Or maybe, and this thought surprised him, it was because she reminded him of someone he once knew. Someone gentle, someone brave, someone who also believed in showing gratitude with more than words. Caleb rubbed his face, trying to shake the feeling. But feelings didn't always listen to reason. Eventually, he retreated into the cabin, set the lantern on the table, and sat on the bed. His body was tired, but his thoughts were wide awake. He lay down and stared at the wooden ceiling, the shadows dancing from the flickering lantern light. And then, slowly, sleep began to pull him under. But his dreams weren't calm. He dreamed of forests, fog, and delicate footsteps moving quietly through the darkness. He dreamed of the girl's braided hair, the soft way she spoke, the look in her eyes before she disappeared. Her image drifted through his dreams like a song carried on the wind. When he woke with a start sometime during the night, the cabin felt colder than usual. The fire had died down to faint red coals. Caleb pulled a blanket over himself and listened to the silence. The forest was quieter than before, almost too quiet. He turned onto his side, trying to return to sleep, but it didn't come easily. He kept thinking about the girl, wondering where she slept that night, wondering if she had shelter, wondering if she had eaten. It wasn't worry that kept him awake, it was something softer, something he couldn't name. Eventually, he drifted off again, though lightly this time, waking several times throughout the night. Each time he opened his eyes, he felt the same gentle pull inside his chest, urging him to trust that something important was about to happen. When the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, Caleb finally gave up on sleep. He sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and stretched. The morning light filtered through the small window, casting soft gold across the wooden floor. It should have been a peaceful morning. A normal morning. But Caleb sensed something different in the air, something quietly waiting. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it to let in the cool morning breeze. The forest smelled fresh, clean, and full of possibility. And then he froze. Out there, just beyond the edge of the porch, someone was standing very still, watching the cabin with calm, steady eyes. It was the young native girl, wrapped in a simple blanket, her braid neat, her hands folded in front of her, as if she had been waiting for the sun. But he never expected she would find her way to his cabin. And yet, here she was. The morning air between them felt strangely warm, filled with the unspoken promise of something beginning. Caleb stood in the doorway of his cabin, unable to speak for a long moment. The soft morning light made everything look calm and peaceful, but something about seeing the young native girl standing only a few steps away filled the quiet air with unexpected meaning. He had spent the whole night thinking about her, wondering where she had gone, wondering if she was safe. And now, without a sound, she was there, like the forest itself had carried her to his doorstep. Her blanket was wrapped around her shoulders against the morning cold, the edges fluttering slightly in the breeze. Her long braid rested neatly over one side of her chest. Her expression was calm, steady, and full of intention. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't lost. She had come because she wanted to. Caleb cleared his throat, unsure how to begin. "Good morning," he said softly. The girl nodded politely, her eyes warm with recognition. "Good morning," she replied in gentle English. Her voice was soft, like the first few notes of a flute. Caleb stepped aside from the door, giving her space. "Are you all right?" he asked, trying not to sound too worried. "You traveled early, must have been cold." She looked at him with a tiny smile, the kind that showed she understood his concern but didn't share it. "I am used to walking early," she said. "The forest is still safe. I came to see you." Those words surprised Caleb more than anything else. "To see me?" he repeated. She nodded again, holding her hands together. "Yes." There was no hesitation in her answer, no confusion. No embarrassment. She had a reason for coming, and she seemed fully sure of it. Caleb stepped off the porch, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle her. "Did something happen in town?" he asked. "Is everything all right with you and your people?" She shook her head. "Nothing happened. Everything is good." He waited for her to say more. He didn't want to push her, but he didn't understand why she had come all the way to his cabin. Then she lifted the small bundle she carried. It had been tucked into her blanket so quietly that Caleb hadn't noticed it. The bundle was made of soft animal skin, tied with a leather cord. "I brought this for you," she said gently. Caleb blinked. "For me?" "Yes," she replied. "You helped me yesterday. You showed fairness. You showed kindness. My people say kindness must be returned. I came to do this." Her words were simple, but they touched him deeply. He had not expected anything in return. He had simply stepped in because it had felt right. "You didn't have to come all this way," he said, his voice warm. "I only wanted to help, that's all." The girl looked at him with steady eyes, eyes full of quiet wisdom. "I know," she murmured. "This is why I came." She held out the bundle with both hands, the gesture full of respect. Caleb hesitated, unsure if he should accept it. "What is this?" he asked softly. "A gift," she said. "From me, from my people, to thank you." Her sincerity left no room for refusal. With slow, careful hands, Caleb accepted the bundle. The leather covering felt smooth and warm. He untied the cord gently, making sure he didn't damage anything. Inside the bundle were several carefully chosen items, small but meaningful. There was a pouch of dried herbs with a fresh, calming scent. A few handmade medicines wrapped in soft leaves. A tiny clay bowl with painted designs around the rim. And at the bottom lay a small wooden symbol, smooth, carved, beautiful. It looked like a tiny circle with markings representing protection and balance. Caleb stared at the items for a moment, touched more deeply than he expected. "This is too much," he said, shaking his head softly. "I don't deserve all this." The girl stepped closer just a little. You helped me from being blamed for something I did not do. That is a big thing, she said. My people believe a good act must be answered with a good act. That keeps the world balanced. Caleb looked at her with gentle respect. Thank you, he said sincerely. You didn't need to repay me, but I'm grateful, truly. She seemed pleased by his acceptance. The blanket around her shoulders shifted as she relaxed, as if a task she had carried with determination was now complete. Caleb felt the morning chill and realized she must still be cold. Would you like to come inside? He asked quietly. At least for a warm drink. You've been walking a long time. She hesitated, not with fear, just with thoughtfulness. Finally, she nodded. If you wish, she replied. Caleb stepped back into the cabin and held the door open for her. She moved with light, careful steps, taking in the small room with quiet curiosity. The cabin was simple. A bed, a table, a few shelves with supplies, and a stone fireplace that still held the warmth of last night's fire. She looked at everything with gentle eyes, not judging, just observing. He placed her gift bundle on the table and quickly began preparing warm tea. He used the little metal pot he kept for guests, though he rarely had any. As the water heated, he glanced over at her. She stood near the window, the morning light touching her hair. She looked peaceful, like she belonged anywhere nature touched. May I know your name? Caleb asked, trying not to interrupt her thoughts. She turned toward him. My name is Yana, she said softly. It means eternal blossom. A beautiful name, he said. She smiled slightly. Thank you, and you are? Caleb Morgan, he replied. Just Caleb is fine. She repeated it quietly, almost like testing the sound. Caleb. She accepted it respectfully, wrapping her fingers around it and breathing in the steam with appreciation. They sat at the small wooden table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Not because of awkwardness, but because the silence felt natural, like a gentle stream running between them. Finally, Ayana set down her cup. Yesterday, she said slowly, when I was in the town, I felt alone. I tried to speak in your language, but they did not understand my way. You understood, you listened. Many people do not listen. Caleb leaned forward on his elbows. I think we all have different ways. Doesn't mean one is wrong, just means we need to learn from each other. Yana nodded. Yes, my people say the same. She reached into her blanket and pulled out the carved bird she had tried to trade the day before. Caleb blinked in surprise. He thought she had given it to the storekeeper. He gave it back to me after you left, she explained quietly. He said he was sorry. He said he did not understand. Caleb smiled softly. I'm glad he made it right. She placed the carving on the table between them. I made this, she said. My grandmother taught me. Each carving is a story. This bird means guidance. It means someone who shows the right path. Caleb's chest tightened slightly. That's a strong meaning. Yana looked at him with sincerity. I want you to have it. He shook his head gently. I can't take something so personal. You can, she insisted warmly, because it belongs with you now. Her calm confidence made him stop arguing. Instead, he picked up the carving carefully and turned it in his hand. The details were simple but full of meaning. It felt like holding a part of her culture, a part of her story. Yana, he began softly, unsure what to say next. She waited patiently. You don't owe me anything, he said. I only stepped in because anyone should. I know, she replied, but I came not because I owed you. I came because gratitude is important. When someone does something good, my people stay connected with them, even for a short time. I came to show respect, and to give you my thanks in the way I know. Her words were simple, but they carried deep truth. Caleb nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected to. The morning sun shone softly through the window, filling the cabin with warm gold. The air felt lighter now, as if the world outside was blessing this unexpected meeting. Yana finished her tea and set the cup down gently, but she did not stand to leave. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with calm intention. There is something more, she said quietly. Caleb's eyes softened with curiosity. Something more. Yes, she replied. I did not only come to say thank you, I came because I felt something yesterday, something I wanted to understand. Caleb waited, giving her space to explain. She looked around the cabin, at the wooden walls, the small window, the fireplace, the tools, the things that made up his simple life. Then she looked back at him. You carry kindness, she said. You carry patience. You carry quiet strength. These things are rare in many places. My people believe that when we see these things, we should not walk away without learning more. Caleb felt warmth rise in his chest. I didn't know I showed all that. Iana smiled gently. You did. He didn't know what to say next. He only knew that her presence filled the cabin with a peaceful energy he had never felt before. You came a long way, he said quietly. I'm honored you did, she nodded. I came because something in my heart told me it was right. For a long moment they simply sat there, two people from different worlds connected by one simple act of kindness. No tension, no fear, only quiet understanding. Outside, the forest whispered softly. Inside, something new was beginning, something gentle, meaningful, and unexpected. And Caleb realized that Ayana hadn't just come to repay him. She had come because this moment was meant to happen. Caleb and Ayana sat inside the warm cabin for a long while, letting the quiet settle naturally between them. Outside, the morning sun slowly climbed higher, shining through the pine branches and making soft, moving shadows on the cabin walls. The world felt peaceful, almost as if nature itself wanted them to slow down and understand each other more deeply. Iana sipped the last of her tea and gently placed the cup back on the table. She touched the wooden carving she had given him earlier, brushing her fingers over the smooth wings of the little bird. The gesture was calm, familiar, like she was touching a memory. Caleb watched her with quiet respect. He felt no need to rush her or fill the silence with unnecessary words. She carried an energy that made everything around her feel softer, lighter. Being near her reminded him of early mornings on the trail when the world felt fresh and full of new possibilities. Yana looked up at him, her eyes thoughtful. Your home feels peaceful, she said softly. Thank you, Caleb replied. It's small, but it's mine. And it stays quiet out here. Not many folks walk this way, she nodded. Quiet is good. Quiet helps the heart listen. Caleb smiled at her choice of words. Your people must teach you many wise things. She returned a gentle smile. Yes. My grandmother says the heart knows more than the ears, but we must be quiet to hear it. Caleb leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. Sounds like your grandmother taught you a lot. She taught me everything good in me, Iana said. She taught me to carve, to gather plants, to listen to stories, to understand people, even when their words are few. Caleb nodded slowly. That's a gift. Not everyone listens that way. Yana looked out the window, watching the trees sway. For a moment she seemed lost in her own memories. Yesterday, she said softly, when the storekeeper misunderstood me, I felt something inside, not sadness, not anger, just alone. Caleb understood more than she expected. It must have been hard, he said. Being misunderstood often makes a person feel separate. Ayana looked back at him. Yes, but then you came, you didn't shout, you didn't judge, you didn't look down on me, you just listened, you understood. Her voice softened even further. And then I didn't feel alone. Those words touched Caleb deeply. He didn't show it outwardly, but inside something warm spread through him, something gentle like a small fire slowly glowing brighter. You weren't alone, he said. You're not alone now either. Yana smiled quietly, and her eyes softened in a way that carried both gratitude and trust. After a long pause, she stood up from the table. Her feet moved silently across the wooden floor as she walked toward the shelves near the fireplace. She studied the dried herbs Caleb had stored there, each tied in bundles of different colors. You keep these well, she said, but some are old, they do not help as much now. Caleb laughed lightly. I know, I gather them myself, but I'm not always sure what I'm doing. Yana turned toward him. I can show you if you want. Of course, he said warmly. I'd be grateful. She stepped outside the cabin and Caleb followed her. The morning air was cool but pleasant. The forest around his home felt welcoming, full of birdsong and sunlight filtering through green needles. Yana knelt beside a patch of small, leafy plants near the edge of the cabin. This one helps when someone is tired, she said, touching the leaves gently. It gives strength. Caleb knelt beside her. I've seen this plant for years and I never knew what it was good for, she smiled. Nature talks, but only if we listen. She moved carefully, collecting only a few leaves and placing them into her small pouch. Then she stood and walked toward a taller cluster of plants farther out. This one helps the stomach, she explained. Good for days when the food is too heavy, Caleb chuckled. I could have used that last winter. Yana's soft laughter joined his. It was a peaceful sound, blending perfectly with the rustling forest. They spent a long time walking through the trees together. She showed him different plants, each with its own purpose, healing, calming, strengthening, soothing. She knew many things about the land, things Caleb had never learned even though he lived near it for years. Walking with her felt like seeing the forest for the first time. At times she walked a little ahead of him, moving gracefully like she had grown up in the roots and branches. Her quiet steps barely disturbed the fallen leaves. Caleb admired her ease with nature. She wasn't simply in the forest, she was part of it. After gathering what they needed, they returned to the cabin. Tiana began sorting the herbs on the table, explaining which ones should be dried, which ones needed boiling, and which ones could be used fresh. Caleb listened closely, wanting to remember every word. "You are patient," she observed after a while. Caleb shrugged lightly. "Patience comes from living alone for many years." Yana shook her head gently. "No, some people live alone and grow restless. You grew calm." Her words surprised him because she was right. He had been alone often, but he never felt angry or bitter about it. He simply lived quietly, helping when needed and moving through life without causing harm. "We all choose our way," he said softly. "Yes," she agreed, "and your way is a good one." As they worked, Caleb realized how comfortable the cabin felt with her inside. Her presence brought warmth, not just from the fire, but from her calm spirit. She moved with care, spoke with care, and even her silence carried meaning. He found himself wanting to understand her more, her thoughts, her experiences, her way of seeing the world. When they finished sorting the herbs, Ayana stepped outside again, gathering small sticks and dried pine needles for the fire. Caleb followed, offering to help, but she shook her head gently. "This is my gift today," she said. He didn't argue. Instead, he watched her gather the materials with practiced hands. She built the fire carefully, placing the sticks in a neat way that allowed air to move through easily. When the flames rose, she sat back, satisfied. "You're skilled," Caleb said. "My fires don't start that easily." "My grandmother taught me," she replied warmly. "Fire is like a friend. Treat it gently and it helps you. Treat it carelessly and it leaves." Caleb sat beside her on the porch steps. The forest spread out before them in shades of green and gold. Yana wrapped her blanket around her shoulders again and breathed in the pine-scented air. "Your home feels safe," she said quietly. Caleb turned toward her. "Does your home feel safe too?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but my people are moving soon. We travel with the seasons. I will help my grandmother gather things when I return." Caleb felt a small ache in his chest at the thought of her leaving. He didn't show it, but he felt it. "That must be a lot of work," he said gently. "It is," she replied, "but it is good work." "Will you be far?" he asked before he could stop himself. She looked at him with understanding. "Far for walking, not far for the heart." Her answer touched him deeply, even though he didn't fully understand why yet. They sat together quietly, watching the forest breathe around them. The wind whispered through the branches. Birds called to each other across the open sky, and the gentle warmth of the fire curled upward like a peaceful spirit. Yana turned to him again. "Yesterday you changed something," she said softly. Caleb frowned slightly. "Changed something?" "Yes," she said. "You changed the way my heart felt. You showed me a kindness I didn't expect. That is why I came." Her words were simple but powerful. Caleb looked at her, seeing the honesty in her eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly, "more than you know." Iana smiled, small, warm, genuine. "I know," she said gently. And in that moment, without needing any dramatic event or loud declaration, something real and meaningful formed between them. A connection built from respect, understanding, gratitude, and gentle warmth. Not because they were trying to create it, not because they needed it, but because it was meant to happen. The morning sun rose slowly, spilling warm light over the tall pines surrounding Caleb Morgan's cabin. Dew glistened on the grass, and the forest seemed to breathe softly, as if it had been waiting for this day to arrive. Caleb was already awake, sitting quietly by the small wooden table, sipping his morning coffee. He enjoyed the simple calm of the cabin mornings, the soft smell of pine, the quiet birdsong, and the way the sun touched every corner of his home. He thought about Ayana and the time they had spent together yesterday. Her presence had brought a kind of calm and understanding he had not known he was missing. The way she had moved, spoken, and taught him things about the forest and its herbs had left a gentle warmth in his chest. Caleb could still feel it, even in the quiet hours before dawn had fully passed. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at the door. Caleb paused, setting down his cup, and glanced toward the cabin entrance. His heart stirred with curiosity. He wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors rarely came to his home in the forest, and yet he had a quiet feeling deep in his chest that this knock was not ordinary. He rose slowly, tying the string of his boots, and opened the door. There she stood, Iana. Her blanket was wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the morning chill, her long braid resting neatly down her back. Her dark eyes were calm but purposeful, shining with a quiet determination. Caleb's chest tightened slightly at the sight of her. He hadn't expected her to return so soon. "Ayana," he said gently. "Good morning, you're early." She nodded politely. "Morning," she said softly. "I came because I wanted to continue something from yesterday." Caleb stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "Of course," he said. "You're welcome any time." Ayana stepped inside quietly, taking a careful look around the cabin. Everything looked the same as yesterday, but the space felt warmer somehow with her return. She set down a small bundle of herbs and a carved wooden piece she had been carrying. Caleb noticed immediately that she had made more small offerings, simple, thoughtful gifts that spoke of respect and care. "You do not need to bring me gifts," Caleb said gently, picking up the bundle. "I only helped you because it was right. That is enough for me." Yana looked at him calmly, her eyes kind but firm. "This is not just a gift," she said softly. "It is gratitude, yes, but it is also learning. I came to show respect and to continue what we started." Caleb felt a quiet admiration for her words. She moved with a maturity beyond her years, and even though she was young, she carried herself with a sense of purpose and understanding that left him silently amazed. He gestured toward the table. "Would you like to sit? We can talk, or we can just enjoy the morning." Yana sat down, her movements careful and deliberate. She placed the bundle on the table, opening it to reveal dried herbs, small carved wooden tokens, and a few simple tools for gathering and preparing plants. Caleb leaned over, studying the items with fascination. He realized how much care she had put into preparing them. Each item was useful, thoughtful, and symbolic of her knowledge and culture. "You really know a lot about the forest," he said, quietly impressed. She smiled faintly. "My people teach us. We learn from the earth, from the wind, from the plants and the animals. Every morning there is a lesson if we watch carefully." Caleb nodded. He thought about the countless years he had spent traveling, observing, and surviving in the wild. Yet he realized he had learned so little about the deeper lessons the forest could teach. Iana had a gift. She could see, understand, and respect the quiet rhythm of nature in ways he had only just begun to notice. After a pause, Ayana spoke again. "Yesterday, when you helped me, it was more than kindness. It showed me that there are people who listen, who understand. That is rare. I wanted to show you that gratitude is not only about giving things, it is also about learning, sharing, and remembering." Caleb felt a warmth he could not describe. He had spent most of his life helping when needed, yet no one had ever explained the importance of gratitude in such a gentle and meaningful way. He understood now that it was more than words. It was respect, attention, and care. "Then let us share today," Caleb said, smiling softly. "Teach me more, I want to learn." Yana nodded, and together they moved to the edge of the forest. The morning air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. She walked ahead of him, her movements light and confident, stopping at small clusters of plants. She explained which plants were good for calming, which for healing, which for energy, and which could be used in small remedies. Caleb listened carefully, noting every detail, storing the knowledge in his mind. As they worked together, Caleb noticed how naturally she moved between the world of humans and the world of nature. She had grown up in a way that allowed her to see both, to respect both, and to understand that balance was the key to harmony. It was a lesson he realized he had always needed but never learned fully. They gathered herbs, carried water, and checked on small patches of plants near the cabin. Caleb found himself laughing quietly at her occasional gentle corrections, and she smiled whenever he listened and tried again. The forest around them seemed to hum softly, as if approving their presence and their quiet work. Later, they returned to the cabin to prepare some of the herbs. Iana taught Caleb how to dry them properly, how to store them so they would retain their strength, and how to create simple poultices for minor injuries. Caleb followed her instructions carefully, and by the end, he realized he had learned more in one morning than he had in many years of wandering alone. After the work was done, they sat quietly by the fire, sharing a simple meal of bread and dried fruit. The warmth of the fire filled the room, and the light danced softly across the wooden walls. Caleb noticed that Ayanna had a peaceful aura around her, a calm confidence that made even the smallest tasks feel meaningful. "You are very patient," she observed. "I've had many years to practice," Caleb replied lightly. "Patience is easier when there is no rush." Ayanna nodded. "Yes, but patience is also about understanding, about listening, about caring without asking for reward." Caleb smiled quietly. "I think you understand that too." She looked at him with a gentle smile. "I try, we all try. Some days are easier than others." They finished their meal in quiet companionship, neither feeling the need to fill the silence with idle words. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from mutual respect and understanding. Caleb realized that he had not felt such peace for a long time. Her presence had brought a sense of balance, warmth, and quiet joy that he had not expected. As the day passed, Caleb noticed the way the sunlight shifted across the cabin, how the shadows grew long, and how the gentle wind rustled the pine branches outside. Ayanna helped him clean, arrange herbs, and even repaired a small section of the cabin roof she noticed was loose. Caleb watched her work, silently admiring the combination of skill, patience, and quiet strength she carried. When the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, Ayanna prepared to leave. Caleb felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of her departure, but he also understood that she had her own life, her own people, and her own responsibilities. He would not try to hold her back. "You've done a lot for me today," he said softly. "I hope you know how much I appreciate it." She smiled gently. "I hope you know that I appreciate you too, not just for helping me yesterday, but for listening today, for learning, for being patient. That matters more than any gift." Caleb felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that their meeting had been more than a simple act of kindness. It had been a bridge between two people, two ways of seeing the world, and two hearts willing to understand each other. Before leaving, Yana handed Caleb the small, carved bird again. "Keep this," she said softly. "It is a reminder that kindness creates connection, that respect brings understanding, and that the heart remembers what words cannot say." Caleb held the bird carefully, turning it in his hands. He felt the smooth edges, the carved details, and the meaning it carried. He realized that this small object made by her hands represented much more than gratitude. It represented the bond they had formed, however brief or long it might last. "Thank you, Ayanna," he said quietly. "I will keep it always." She nodded, a gentle, knowing smile on her face. "And if you ever need guidance or if your path is unclear, the forest will help you, and so will we, my people." With a final respectful nod, she stepped outside, blending with the golden light of the afternoon. Caleb watched as she walked toward the forest, disappearing among the trees with quiet purpose. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that their connection would remain, carried silently by respect, gratitude, and shared understanding. Caleb returned to the cabin, holding the carved bird gently in his hand. He placed it on the small table by the window where sunlight fell on it. He knew he would look at it often, remembering the lessons she had taught him, not just about plants or nature, but about patience, kindness, and the quiet strength that comes from understanding and gratitude. The forest outside continued its gentle rhythm, as if agreeing with him. The wind whispered through the pines, the birds called softly, and the sunlight touched every leaf. Caleb felt that he was not alone, that he was part of something larger, something full of quiet meaning. He realized that one small act of courage and kindness could create connections that lasted far beyond a single day. And in that quiet cabin, surrounded by the simple beauty of the forest and the memory of Iana's gentle presence, Caleb Morgan understood something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. That true kindness, respect, and understanding are treasures more valuable than anything else the world could give.